Hi, this is Larry Jordan, and welcome to this Power Up webinar entitled Audio Mixing in Soundtrack Pro. The goals for this session are to present an integrated workflow, to send a project from Final Cut Pro to Soundtrack Pro for mixing, then bring the completed mix back to Final Cut Pro for final output. Here's a mixing workflow that we can use as a sample. Assign audio to appropriate tracks in Final Cut Pro. Send the project to Soundtrack Pro. Rearrange and clean up the audio clips to simplify the mix. Add fades to clips to smooth transitions. Add tracks and spot-in sound effects. Add effects filters to the tracks. Add submixes to improve control over the mix. Set track levels and panning. Save the Soundtrack Pro project file. And when everything sounds perfect, export the final mix as a stereo AIF file. Finally, import the mix into Final Cut Pro for final output. What we're going to cover today are two sides to the mixing process. As usual, it starts with planning before we start doing. To get ready, you'll learn why and how to checkerboard your audio tracks and determine what audio levels to use for your project. Then we'll get to work and we'll send a project from Final Cut to Soundtrack and follow the steps of our workflow to create a final mix. Keep in mind that my goal for today is to illustrate the process. We won't have time to create a perfect mix for the entire project. Before we get too carried away, though, I want to explain what the word checkerboarding means. This is the process of editing similar audio clips to the same audio track in Final Cut Pro in order to organize your audio for mixing. For example, we would put all of our narrator clips on the same track. Here's a key concept. You use stereo for sounds that you want to hear move through space. Sound effects should be recorded in stereo, but single interview subjects should not. If you have one person on camera talking, you use one mic and capture the clip as dual channel mono, not stereo. If you're using two mics to capture one person talking, you would still bring the audio into Final Cut, but you'd bring it in as dual channel mono. As I like to tell my students, it's one voice, one mic, one channel. So here's a system for organizing audio clips for a documentary in preparation for a mix. On track A1, put all of your male talking head sync sound. This is the audio that relates to the video on V1. And on A2, all your female talking head sync sound. Guys don't sound the same as girls. We're not going to apply exactly the same filter settings to both, so by separating by gender, it simplifies the process of adding filters later. On tracks A3 and A4, put the B-roll sync audio. This is the sound that goes with the pictures on V2. On A5, put your narrator audio. On A6, 7, and 8, put wild, that's not synced, sound effects. And on A10, put all of your music cues. If you need to make a transition, add another pair of tracks, and on A11 and 12, put the additional music cues you need when you want to make a transition from one piece of music to another. Now you can delete the tracks you don't need, but I always organize them exactly the same way. It makes editing and finding stuff later both easier. Audio levels are additive. This means that the more tracks that are playing at the same time, the louder the total audio level. An interesting thing about audio is that it's not linear, it's logarithmic. For every 6 dB increase in audio level, the perceived volume doubles. This means that negative 6 dB is the 50% point for your audio levels. Final Cut and Soundtrack meters measure peak levels. Some audio standards refer to average audio levels, which these meters don't measure. We're looking at peak, not average. And finally, never ever let audio levels exceed 0 dB. If you remember only one thing from this session, this is the most important line. Never ever let your audio levels exceed 0 dB. So when it comes time to set your audio levels, remember you're setting peaks. They need to be close to, but not above 0 dB. And my recommendation is to do a total mix from -3 to -6 dB. This means that when you're hearing everything playing, your audio meters are bouncing between -3 and -6. Meters never hold still. They bounce. And notice those two thin lines above the left and right green bars. That's the peak hold indicator. That's the loudest your audio has been for the last second. Because the meters bounce so quickly, it's very, very easy to get confused as to what level your audio is actually at. That's what those peak hold indicators show. As you're editing your audio into your project, you can use these levels to rough in your audio. Set your principal audio from -6 to -12 dB, your sound effects roughly -12 to -18, and music when it's in an underscore capacity should go around -18 dB. Then you use your good ears, your good speakers, and your good common sense, and you adjust the levels of all of your clips until they sound right, keeping in mind that your total mix needs to bounce the meters between -3 and -6.